The chessboard sat on the mahogany table like a battlefield waiting for war. It was an expensive set hand-carved pieces from India, the board inlaid with ebony and maple, each square perfectly aligned. The kind of chess set that existed more for display than actual play, positioned in the executive lounge of Meridian Technologies like a piece of corporate art. Thomas Reyes had been cleaning around it for 6 months, careful never to disturb the pieces, which were always arranged in the same position. Mid-game, frozen in time, a puzzle no one seemed interested in solving. Tonight, at 2:47 a.m., he made a mistake. His cleaning cart bumped the table. Not hard, but enough. The white knight tipped over with a soft click against the board. "Damn it," Thomas muttered, setting down his mop. He reached for the fallen piece, intending to put it back exactly where it had been. But as his fingers touched the cool ivory, he paused. His eyes traced the board, reading the position like a language he'd spent years learning to speak. It was a Sicilian defense, Najdorf variation. Black was down a pawn but had superior piece activity. White's knight had been on f3, controlling the center, but the position was actually losing. White's next move should have been to retreat the bishop to e2, not advance the knight. Whoever set this up had made a fundamental error in evaluation. Thomas's fingers moved without conscious thought. He righted the white knight, then shifted it 2 squares back to where it should have been for white to have any chance of holding the position. That's not where it was. The voice came from behind him, sharp and clear in the empty silence of the executive floor. Thomas spun around, his heart lurching. Diana Mercer stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Thomas's monthly rent. She was the CEO of Meridian Technologies, a woman whose face appeared on the covers of business magazines with headlines like "The Ice Queen of Silicon Alley" and "How Diana Mercer Built a Billion-Dollar Empire Before 40." She was also, according to the company gossip Thomas overheard while emptying trash bins, notoriously difficult, demanding, and utterly intolerant of mistakes. I'm sorry, Miss Mercer," Thomas stammered, stepping back from the table. "I bumped the cart. The piece fell. I was just putting it back." "That's not where it was," she repeated, moving closer. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with the steady rhythm of a countdown. "The knight was on f3. You moved it to d4. Thomas's mind raced. He could lie, claim he'd simply placed it randomly. But something in Diana Mercer's eyes, sharp, analytical, missing nothing, told him the lie would be instantly detected and held against him. "The position was wrong," he said quietly. "I mean, whoever set it up originally. White's knight on f3 in that position is a blunder. Black has nd4, and after the queen moves, n2 is a royal fork. White loses the exchange and the game within 5 moves. The knight needed to be on d4 first to prevent the fork." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Thomas watched Diana's expression shift through several configurations: surprise, calculation, and something that might have been amusement. "You play chess," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I used to." "Used to?" Thomas shrugged, acutely aware of his janitor's uniform, the mop in his hand, the vast chasm between his world and hers. "It's been a while." Diana stepped past him to the board, her eyes scanning the position with renewed interest. She reached down and moved the white knight back to f3, restoring the original setup. Then she looked at Thomas with an expression he couldn't quite read. Show me the line you saw. Play it out, Miss Mercer. I should really consider it a direct order from your CEO." Her tone was light, but there was steel underneath. "You moved my piece. The least you can do is explain why." Thomas hesitated, then set down his mop. He approached the board like a pilgrim approaching a shrine, something sacred he'd been denied access to for too long. His fingers touched the black knight, and muscle memory took over. The pieces began to move. Black plays in d4. He narrated quietly, moving the knight to the center square. White's only good option is to move the queen, probably here to b3, attacking the b7 pawn, and keeping an eye on d5. But then black plays na2 check. He placed the knight next to the white king. It's a fork. The king has to move, and then black takes the rook on a1. White is down the exchange and the position collapses. He stepped back, his heart pounding. It had been 3 years since he played a serious game. 3 years since the last tournament, before the divorce, before custody arrangements and child support payments and 60-hour work weeks left no time for anything except survival. But the patterns were still there, encoded in his brain like a second language. You didn't forget chess. It forgot you. Maybe, but it was always waiting to be remembered. Diana studied the board in silence. Then she swept all the pieces off with one swift motion of her arm. They clattered across the table and onto the floor, a cascade of ivory and ebony. Thomas flinched. His mind immediately calculated the cost of the set, wondered if he'd be charged for the damage, if he'd just lost his job over a chess position. Set them up, Diana said, her voice calm. Standard. Opening position. You're black. I'm sorry? I want to see if you can play as well as you can analyze. She pulled out a chair and sat, her posture perfect, her gaze fixed on the board. Unless you were lying about the position. Unless you just got lucky. Thomas should have declined. It was 2:50 a.m. He had 4 more floors to clean before his shift ended. His daughter, Maya, was asleep at home being watched by Mrs. Chen from downstairs, a neighbor who charged him $20 a night and wouldn't appreciate him being late. But the board was there. The pieces were scattered like an invitation. And Diana Mercer was looking at him not as the janitor, not as the invisible man who emptied her trash, but as a chess player, as someone who might be able to give her a game. I'll need to be done by 6, Thomas said, bending to collect the fallen pieces. My shift ends then. Then you'd better not waste time with a slow opening. They set up the pieces in silence, the familiar starting position taking shape. Thomas took the black pieces, sitting across from the woman who signed his paychecks, and probably had the power to fire him with a single phone call. Diana moved first, her hand steady and confident. E4. The king's pawn opening. Classical, aggressive, the most analyzed opening in chess history. Thomas responded instinctively. C5. The Sicilian defense. His specialty. What followed was something Thomas hadn't experienced in 3 years. The pure, crystalline focus of competitive chess. The outside world fell away: the cleaning cart, the mop, the corporate building, the fact that he was playing his boss at 3 a.m. While technically on the clock, there was only the board, the pieces, the infinite branching tree of possibilities. Diana played aggressively, pressing in the center, sacrificing a pawn for piece activity. Thomas countered with precision, finding defensive resources, slowly building counterplay on the queen's side. They didn't speak except to announce moves, falling into the quiet intensity that chess players recognized as sacred. By move 30, Thomas was up a pawn. By move 40, he had a winning endgame 2 connected passed pawns on the queen's side that Diana's pieces couldn't stop. Diana stared at the board for a long moment, her fingers resting on her king. Then she tipped it over in resignation. The sound of the king hitting the board seemed impossibly loud in the silent office. When did you learn to play like that? Diana asked, leaning back in her chair. There was no anger in her voice, no wounded pride, just curiosity. My father taught me when I was 6, Thomas said, carefully setting the pieces back into their starting position, a habit from childhood. Always leave the board ready for the next game. I played competitively through college, got up to a 2,200 rating. I was aiming for master level. What stopped you? The question hung in the air. Thomas thought about all the possible answers. The marriage that fell apart. The daughter who needed food and clothes and a stable home more than she needed a father who spent weekends at chess tournaments. The reality that chess mastery didn't pay the bills, that a 2,200 rating meant nothing to an employer looking at a resume. Life, he said finally. Life stopped me. Diana nodded slowly, as if this answer made perfect sense to her. She stood, smoothing her suit. What's your hourly rate? As a janitor? $18 an hour. And you work how many hours a week? 60. Usually. Sometimes more. Diana pulled out her phone, her thumbs moving across the screen. I'm sending you a calendar invite. Tomorrow night. 11 p.m. My office. Don't be late. Thomas blinked. I'm sorry? You heard me. 11 p.m. My office. She was already walking toward the elevator, her heels clicking with that same steady rhythm. She pressed the call button, then turned back to look at him. I haven't lost a chess game in 8 years, Mr. Reyes. I play every week against Boston Steinberg. He's a 2,400 rated master, and I've beaten him 4 times this year. You just beat me in 43 moves. So, either you're much better than a 2,200 rating, or I had a terrible off night. I intend to find out which. The elevator doors opened. Diana stepped inside, then held the door with one hand. One more thing. That position on the board, the one you corrected? I set it up myself 3 months ago. It's from a game I played against Steinberg. He had white, I had black, and I won. You're absolutely right that it's a losing position for white. I kept it there as a reminder. A reminder of what? Diana smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine. That even masters make mistakes. And that the trick isn't avoiding mistakes, it's recognizing them and learning from them before they destroy you. The doors closed, and she was gone. Thomas stood alone in the executive lounge, staring at the chessboard with its pieces arranged in perfect starting position. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline, probably, from the game and the surreal conversation that had followed it. His phone buzzed. The calendar invite had arrived. Chess match, Diana Mercer's office, 11 p.m., recurring, weekly. Recurring, weekly. Thomas looked at the time. 3:47 a.m. He'd spent an hour playing chess when he should have been cleaning. He grabbed his mop and cart and hurried toward the elevator, his mind already racing ahead to tomorrow night, to the next game, to the question of what Diana Mercer really wanted from him. Because in his experience, people like Diana Mercer didn't do anything without a reason. And that reason was rarely as simple as wanting a good chess opponent. The next morning, Thomas stood in the cramped kitchen of his studio apartment, making breakfast for Maya while his brain felt like it was wrapped in cotton. 4 hours of sleep wasn't enough, but it was what he had. The coffee in his chipped mug tasted like burnt rubber, but it was hot and caffeinated, which made it good enough. Dad, you're staring at the toaster again, Maya said from her spot at their tiny fold-out table. She was 9 years old with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and her mother's sharp eyes that missed nothing. Sorry, kiddo. Thomas blinked, pulling himself back to the present. The toast had popped up 2 minutes ago, and he hadn't noticed. Did you finish your math homework? Last night? Mrs. Chen helped me with the word problems. Maya poked at her eggs with a fork. Are you okay? You look tired. I'm fine. Just had a long night at work. Did something happen? Thomas considered lying, then decided against it. Maya was too smart for his lies. Had been for years. I played chess with my boss. Maya's eyes widened. Really? Like, at work? Yeah. She found me looking at one of her chessboards and challenged me to a game. Did you win? Thomas smiled despite his exhaustion. I did. Actually. Cool. Maya grinned. Then her expression turned thoughtful. Wait, is that good? Like, you're not going to get fired for beating your boss, Are you? The question hit closer to Thomas's own anxiety than he wanted to admit. I don't think so. She wants to play again tonight. That's good, right? She wouldn't want to play again if she was mad. Probably not. Thomas slid the toast onto a plate and brought it to the table. But I'm not totally sure what she wants. Rich people don't usually do things without a reason. Maybe she just wants to play chess, Maya offered, spreading peanut butter on her toast with the methodical precision of someone following an important ritual. Not everything has to be complicated, Dad. Sometimes, people just like what they like. Thomas watched his daughter, wondering when she'd gotten so wise. Maybe she was right. Maybe Diana Mercer just wanted a decent chess opponent and had found one in an unexpected place. Or maybe there was something else going on, something he couldn't see yet. In his experience, surprises from rich people were rarely good surprises. His phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. Thomas answered cautiously. Hello, Mr. Reyes? This is Karen Mitchell, Diana Mercer's executive assistant. Miss Mercer asked me to confirm that you received last night's calendar invitation and to let you know that she's arranged coverage for your janitorial duties during your weekly chess matches. Your supervisor has been informed that you'll be unavailable from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. every Thursday night, until further notice. Thomas nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? Your Thursday night cleaning shift. It's been covered. Miss Mercer was concerned that playing chess during your work hours might constitute a conflict, so she's arranged for another member of the janitorial staff to handle your Thursday assignments. You'll still be paid for the full shift, of course. That's not necessary. Miss Mercer thought it was. Karen's voice was professionally neutral, giving nothing away. She also wanted me to ask if you have any dietary restrictions. She's arranging for dinner to be available during your matches. Dinner? Yes, Mr. Reyes. Miss Mercer doesn't eat lunch most days, so she typically has a working dinner around 10 p.m. She thought you might appreciate having something to eat as well, given that you're coming straight from your day job. Thomas's head was spinning. His day job. Because of course Diana Mercer's assistant would have looked into his schedule and discovered that he worked 2 jobs: the daytime warehouse position from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., then the overnight janitorial shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when he could get extra hours. No dietary restrictions, Thomas said, because he didn't know what else to say. But really, this isn't Miss Mercer will see you at 11 p.m. tonight. Have a good day, Mr. Reyes. The line went dead. Thomas stared at his phone like it might explain what had just happened. Dad? Maya's voice pulled him back. You okay? Yeah, I think so. He sat down across from her, trying to process. My boss is being weird. Weird how? Weird, like she's treating playing chess with me like it's an actual job duty. Like she's scheduling it and arranging coverage and providing dinner. Maya considered this while chewing her toast. Maybe she's really serious about chess. You said you used to play in tournaments, right? Where people would play for like 6 hours. Yeah. So maybe this is like that for her. Like, it's important enough to do properly. Maya paused. Or maybe she's just rich and doesn't understand that normal people think it's weird to schedule chess games like their business meetings. Thomas laughed, despite himself. You might be right about that. He got Maya ready for school, walked her to the bus stop, then trudged back to his apartment with his brain still trying to make sense of last night. The smart thing would probably be to decline the invitation, to keep his head down and his world separate. He was a janitor. Diana Mercer was a billionaire CEO. The gulf between them wasn't meant to be bridged by a shared interest in chess. But God, he missed playing, missed the clarity of it, the way his brain felt sharp and alive when faced with a complex position, missed the pure meritocracy of the board, where what mattered wasn't your bank account or your job title but the quality of your moves. And if he was being honest, there was something else too. Diana Mercer had looked at him last night, really looked at him, and seen someone worth challenging. For 6 months, he'd been invisible to her, just another member of the cleaning staff. But the moment she realized he could play chess, something had shifted in how she perceived him. It was intoxicating and dangerous in equal measure. At 10:45 p.m., Thomas stood outside Diana Mercer's office, freshly showered and wearing his best shirt, a button-down he usually reserved for parent-teacher conferences. His hands were shaking slightly. He'd spent all day at the warehouse trying to focus on inventory counts, while his brain kept drifting back to chess positions, variations he should have played last night, strategies for their next game. He knocked on the frosted glass door. "Come in." Diana's office was vast, probably larger than Thomas's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan at night. The city spread out like a circuit board of light. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, all clean lines and premium materials. And in the center of it all was a chess table, a proper tournament-style setup with a digital clock. Diana sat on one side, already waiting. She'd changed from her corporate suit into something more casual, dark jeans and a silk blouse, though she still looked like she belonged in a magazine spread. On the table, next to the chessboard, were 2 covered plates and a bottle of sparkling water. "You're early," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Good. I hate people who waste time with false modesty about punctuality." Thomas sat down, eyeing the covered plates. "Your assistant said you were arranging dinner." "I said I was arranging food. Whether you choose to eat it is up to you." Diana uncovered both plates, revealing what looked like gourmet sandwiches, actual good bread, quality meat and cheese, vegetables that appeared to have been grown by someone who cared. "I have a standing order with a restaurant downstairs. They're not Michelin-starred, but they're competent. The turkey is better than the roast beef." Thomas picked up half of a turkey sandwich, grateful. He'd eaten a protein bar for dinner between jobs, and his stomach had been complaining for hours. "Thank you. You didn't have to do this." "I know I didn't have to. I wanted to." Diana started her own sandwich with the precise movements of someone who approached everything methodically. "Here's how this is going to work. We play a match every Thursday night. Best of 3 games. Time control is game in 60, meaning each player gets 60 minutes for all their moves. If you win the majority of games, I pay you $500. If I win, you get nothing beyond the dinner and the paid time you're already receiving." Thomas nearly choked on his sandwich. $500? Per night. Which, if you play well consistently, works out to $2,000 a month. That's slightly less than what I pay Boston Steinberg for his monthly consultations. But then again, he's a certified master and you're not. Yet, Miss Mercer, Diana, if we're going to do this, we're doing it as chess players, not as CEO and janitor. On Thursday nights, I'm Diana and you're Thomas, and the only hierarchy that matters is who's playing better chess. Thomas set down his sandwich, his appetite suddenly gone. "Why are you doing this?" Diana took a sip of water, her expression thoughtful. "Do you know how many people in this building would tell me the truth? People who would look at a position I've set up and tell me I played badly, that I made a mistake, that I should have seen a better move? I don't know. Not many? None. Zero. I'm surrounded by people who are paid to agree with me, to implement my vision, to tell me how brilliant I am." She gestured at the vast office, the city beyond the windows. "I built all of this by being right more often than I was wrong. But the danger of always being right is that you stop questioning whether you might be wrong. You stop learning. You stagnate." She moved the chess pieces to their starting positions with practiced efficiency. "Last night, you looked at a board I'd set up as a trophy and immediately saw the mistake. You didn't hesitate, Didn't check to see if it was appropriate to correct me. Didn't worry about the social hierarchy. You just saw the truth of the position and spoke it. Then you beat me in a fair game. When's the last time someone did that to me? When's the last time someone made me feel like I had something to learn? Thomas understood. Then, this wasn't charity or eccentricity or some billionaire's passing whim. Diana Mercer was lonely. Not emotionally. He suspected she had plenty of people in her personal life, whatever that looked like for someone like her, but intellectually lonely. She'd climbed so high that there was no one left above her to push her to be better. I can't promise I'll win, Thomas said. Last night might have been luck. You might destroy me. Tonight. If you thought that, you wouldn't be here. Diana's smile was sharp. You're here because you know you're good. Because you remember what it felt like to be good at something that mattered. And because $500 a week would change your life. She wasn't wrong. $500 a week was mortgage payment money, car repair money, Maya's college fund money. It was the difference between surviving and actually living. What if I lose tonight? What if I'm not as good as you think? Then we find out together. Diana hit the clock, starting Thomas's time. Your move. The first game lasted 90 minutes. Thomas lost. Diana played a different opening, the Queen's Gambit instead of King's Pawn, and her preparation was deeper than it had been the night before. She sacrificed material for a kingside attack, her pieces coordinating with the kind of precision that spoke to hours of study and practice. Thomas defended admirably, finding resources that surprised even Diana, but in the end, her attack crashed through, and his king fell. Good defense, Diana said, resetting the board. Most players would have resigned 10 moves earlier. I don't resign unless the position is objectively lost, Thomas replied, still analyzing the final position in his mind. There's always a chance for a mistake. True, but knowing when you're beaten is also a skill. The second game was closer. Thomas had white, played his favorite Italian game, and built a small but persistent advantage in the middle game. They reached an endgame with rooks and pawns where Thomas was up a single pawn, theoretically winning, but requiring precise technique to convert. He converted it, 47 moves, and Diana's king was trapped in a mating net. Well, Diana said, studying the final position with what looked like genuine pleasure, that was instructive. Show me where I went wrong. They spent the next 20 minutes analyzing the game, finding the critical moment where Diana should have traded rooks to reach a drawn king and pawn endgame. Thomas annotated the variations on a notepad Diana provided, his hand moving quickly across the page, the analysis flowing out of him like a language he'd been forbidden to speak for too long. One more game, Diana said, checking the time. We have 40 minutes before I have to prep for a 1 a.m. conference call with Tokyo. The third game was a battle. Both players came out swinging, castling on opposite sides and launching pawn storms toward each other's kings. The position became razor-sharp, full of tactical complications, the kind of chess where one mistake meant immediate death. Thomas found a brilliant piece sacrifice on move 27, a rook offer that Diana had to accept, which opened up the A-file for Thomas's queen to invade. The attack was unstoppable. 3 moves later, Diana's king fell. She sat back in her chair, a look of genuine surprise on her face. 2-1. You win. Thomas felt something unfamiliar spreading through his chest. Pride, maybe, or relief, or the simple satisfaction of playing well and being recognized for it. Diana pulled out her phone and tapped a few times. Thomas's phone buzzed a moment later, a payment notification. $500, deposited directly into his account. Same time next week, Diana said, already standing, shifting back into CEO mode. I'm going to study your games and prepare better. You won't beat me as easily next time. I look forward to it. Thomas gathered his things and headed for the door, but Diana's voice stopped him. Thomas? One more thing. He turned back. "Thank you," she said, and there was something vulnerable in her expression, quickly hidden. "I haven't enjoyed chess this much in years. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that." Thomas nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and left. In the elevator, descending through the silent building toward the lobby, he pulled out his phone and looked at his bank account. The $500 sat there, real and solid. He thought about Maya, about her worn-out shoes and the field trip she'd mentioned that he couldn't quite afford, about the overdue electric bill and the car that needed an oil change, and the thousand small financial anxieties that composed his daily life. $500 wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. More than that, though more than the money was the memory of Diana Mercer, looking at him not as the janitor, not as the help, not as someone beneath her, but as an equal across the board. As someone who could challenge her, teach her, make her think. For 2 hours every Thursday night, Thomas Reyes got to be more than what circumstances had reduced him to. He got to be a chess player again. And that, he was realizing, might be worth even more than the money. 6 weeks later, Thomas stood in the toy aisle of Target with Maya, watching her deliberate between two board games with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice weighing a constitutional question. "The Dragon one has better reviews," she said, holding up a fantasy-themed strategy game. "But this one," she grabbed a detective mystery game, "has expansion packs. So we could keep playing it for longer." "Get both," Thomas said. Maya stared at him. "Both?" "Yeah, both. It's your birthday next month. Consider it an early present." "Dad, they're like $30 each." "I know. Get both." The look on Maya's face, pure, uncomplicated joy, was worth every hour he'd spent hunched over chess positions, studying endgames on his phone during warehouse breaks, analyzing Diana's games late into the night. The Thursday night matches had become the cornerstone of Thomas's week. He'd won 3 out of 6 nights, earning $1,500 that had transformed his financial reality from crisis management to something approaching stability. He'd paid off his credit card debt, fixed his car, bought Maya new shoes and winter clothes that actually fit, even managed to put $200 into her college fund. But more than the money, the chess was changing him. His brain felt sharper, more alive. He was sleeping better despite the crazy hours. He found himself smiling more, carrying himself differently. The warehouse supervisor had even commented that Thomas seemed more focused lately, which had earned him additional hours. Everything was getting better. Which was why, when he walked into Diana's office for their 7th match and found 3 other people there, his first feeling was dread that it was all about to end. "Thomas, good," Diana said from her usual spot at the chess table. "Let me introduce you. This is Boston Steinberg." She gestured to a heavy-set man in his 60s with a salt and pepper beard, "My usual chess coach and consultant. These are James and Patricia Yoon, board members of Meridian Technologies and, more relevantly tonight, major investors in the New York Chess Foundation." Thomas shook hands mechanically, his mind racing. This felt like a trap, though he couldn't identify the jaws yet. "Boston has been kind enough to bring his equipment," Diana continued, "so we can record tonight's games properly. And James and Patricia wanted to see firsthand the player I've been telling them about." "You've been talking about me?" Thomas asked carefully. "Extensively. You've beaten me in 7 of our 18 games. That's a 39% win rate against someone who's beaten Boston here 4 times this year. Either I'm getting worse at chess, which seems unlikely given my recent tournament results, or you're significantly better than your old rating suggested." Boston spoke up, his voice gravelly and warm. "Diana sent me 3 of your games. Your endgame technique is exceptional. The way you converted that rook and pawn position in week 2 was textbook Capablanca, simple, clear, precise. I was impressed." Thomas felt heat rising in his face. Boston Steinberg was a legend in New York chess circles. Having him analyze your games was like having a master chef critique your cooking. I've studied a lot of endgames, Thomas managed. That's apparent. But it's more than study. You have intuition. You see which pawns matter, which pieces need to be traded. That can't be fully taught. It's a gift. Patricia Yoon, a sharp-eyed woman in an elegant pantsuit, leaned forward. Mr. Reyes, Diana tells us you used to play competitively. Why did you stop? The question everyone always asked. Thomas gave his standard answer. Life got in the way. I had other responsibilities. A daughter, correct? 9 years old? Thomas's guard went up immediately. Yes. How did you? We did our research. James Yoon said, not unkindly. When Diana first mentioned you 6 weeks ago as a potential investment opportunity, we looked into your background. Investment opportunity? Thomas looked at Diana, confused and growing alarmed. What's he talking about? Diana's expression was unreadable. Let's play our games first. Then we'll talk. Thomas lost both games that night. He tried to focus, tried to bring the same intensity he'd developed over the previous weeks. But his mind kept drifting to the 3 strangers watching, to the word investment, to the growing certainty that the simple arrangement he'd found with Diana was about to become complicated in ways he didn't understand. Diana played brilliantly, capitalizing on his distraction, finding tactics he would have seen if he'd been thinking clearly. The games weren't even close. Rough night, Boston commented after the second game, reviewing the score sheets. You played maybe 200 ratings points below your usual level. What was different? I don't play well with an audience, Thomas said, which was true but not the whole truth. Something to work on. Then, chess is a performance art at the higher levels. You need to be comfortable with people watching. After Boston packed up his equipment and excused himself, the Yoons moved closer to the table. Diana gestured for Thomas to stay seated. All right, Thomas said, his patience fraying. What's going on? What did James mean about an investment opportunity? Diana folded her hands on the table, her posture shifting into what Thomas recognized as her boardroom mode. Thomas, what was your peak rating? Honestly, 2,207. 3 years ago, right before I stopped playing. And where did you think you could have gone? If life hadn't intervened? Thomas hesitated. It felt dangerous to voice the old dream, to admit to ambitions he'd buried. I thought I could make master. Maybe 2,400, if I worked at it. Boston thinks you're already close to that level. He estimates your current playing strength around 2,350, based on your games against me and the analysis you've done. Thomas felt his heart rate pick up. That's not possible. I haven't played seriously in 3 years. Apparently, you're one of those rare players who continued to develop even without formal play. Studying positions, analyzing games in your head during dead time at work. Boston says it's unusual, but not unheard of. Some people's chess understanding continues to deepen through pure thought work, Patricia spoke up. The New York Chess Foundation runs a program for promising players who lack the financial resources to pursue chess seriously. We provide stipends, cover tournament fees, arrange coaching. In exchange, the players represent the foundation in major events and, if they achieve master or grandmaster status, contribute back to the program by teaching the next generation. Thomas's mouth went dry. You want me to join this program? We want you to quit your jobs, Diana said bluntly, and play chess full-time for the next year. The foundation will provide a stipend of $45,000, not luxury money, but enough to live on while you focus entirely on improving. Boston has agreed to coach you 3 times a week. You'll play in major tournaments, work toward master status, and see how high you can climb. The offer sat on the table like a bomb no one had diffused yet. Thomas's first instinct was to laugh at the absurdity of it. Quit his jobs? His stable, necessary jobs that paid his rent and child support, and kept food in his daughter's mouth? I can't, he said. That's insane. I have responsibilities. A daughter to support, bills to pay. I can't just throw away stable income to chase some fantasy about becoming a chess master. It's not a fantasy. Boston's voice came from the doorway. He'd returned, apparently listening. I've coached dozens of players over my career, Boston continued, walking back into the room. I can tell within 5 games whether someone has the potential to reach master level. You have it. More than that, you have something rarer. You have the discipline and work ethic. Most talented players waste their gifts through laziness. You won't. That's a nice speech, Thomas said, hearing the edge in his own voice. But nice speeches don't pay rent. I have a daughter who depends on me. I can't risk our stability on the chance that I might be good enough at a board game. It's not a chance, Diana said quietly. It's a calculated investment. James and Patricia don't throw money at fantasies. They've analyzed your games, consulted with Boston, run the numbers. They believe you can reach master level within 18 months. After that, there are paths to monetize that skill: coaching, writing, exhibition matches, tournament prizes. But more importantly, you'd have a credential. Something that opens doors in ways your current resume doesn't. Thomas shook his head. You don't understand. My ex-wife already thinks I'm unstable because I work 2 jobs and barely see my daughter. If I quit both jobs to play chess, she'll take me back to court. She'll argue I'm not fit to have custody, even the limited custody I have now. She'll use it to prove I'm irresponsible. Not if you have a contract, Patricia said, sliding a folder across the table. This is a 1-year agreement with the foundation. It's a legitimate professional opportunity, not a gamble. Show this to your ex-wife. To the court if necessary. You're not abandoning responsibility, you're taking a calculated career risk with a safety net. If it doesn't work out after a year, you go back to regular employment. But at least you'll know you tried. Thomas opened the folder with shaking hands. The contract was detailed, professional, terrifyingly real. $45,000, paid monthly. Requirements clearly outlined tournament participation, coaching sessions, representation of the foundation at events. A clause about what happened if he reached master level, another about what happened if he didn't. There's something else? Diana said. Something not in the contract because it's coming from me personally, not the foundation. She pulled out another document. Thomas recognized it immediately, a custody agreement template. I've spoken with my legal team. If you accept this opportunity, I'll cover the costs of hiring a family law attorney to help you renegotiate your custody arrangement. Not to take custody away from your ex-wife, but to formalize your situation in a way that protects your rights as a parent while acknowledging your new career circumstances. You'd be able to show the court that you have stable income, professional prospects, and a concrete plan for your future. Thomas stared at the papers, his vision blurring slightly. Why? Why are you doing all this? Diana was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its corporate polish. 3 years ago, I was working 100-hour weeks, building this company, sacrificing everything for success. My marriage fell apart. My friends stopped calling because I never had time for them. I missed my father's last 6 months of life because I was always too busy with another deal, another acquisition, another crisis that couldn't wait. When he died, I found a letter he'd written me. He said he was proud of what I'd built, but he wished I'd made time for the things that made me happy. Not successful, not rich, happy. He said he worried I'd forgotten the difference. She looked directly at Thomas, and he saw something raw in her expression. You're good at chess, Thomas. Not just competent, genuinely gifted. And I've watched you light up during our games in a way you never do when you're pushing that cleaning cart or loading boxes at the warehouse. You've buried something valuable because life demanded it, because responsibility required it. I'm offering you a chance to dig it back up. Not forever, maybe. Not even successfully, potentially. But for 1 year, you get to find out what you could have been. And if I fail? If I'm not as good as Boston thinks? Then you fail, Diana said simply. You try, you give it everything, and if it doesn't work out, at least you'll know. At least your daughter will see that her father had the courage to reach for something difficult. That's worth something too. James Yoon spoke up. Mr. Reyes, we're not asking you to decide tonight. Take the contract home. Think about it. Talk to your daughter. Talk to your ex-wife if you want. But don't let fear be the only reason you say no. There are good reasons to decline this offer: family obligations, risk aversion, a genuine preference for stability. But if you're only saying no because you're afraid of failing, that's not good enough. Thomas looked around the room at these four people who'd somehow decided his chess ability was worth investing in. Boston, the legendary coach who thought he had potential, Patricia and James, board members willing to fund his development, and Diana, who turned their Thursday night games into something far more significant than he'd ever imagined. I need to think, he said finally. It's a lot. Take a week, Diana said. We'll skip next Thursday's match. Come back in 2 weeks with your answer. If it's no, we go back to our regular arrangement. You clean. We play chess on Thursdays. Everyone's happy. If it's yes, you give notice at both jobs, and we start training immediately. Thomas didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the contract on his nightstand, like a ticking clock counting down to a decision he wasn't ready to make. At 6 a.m., he made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, opening a spreadsheet. He'd always been good with numbers. It was one of the few things the Army had taught him that translated to civilian life. He started building a financial model. Current income, warehouse job plus janitorial work, roughly $50,000 a year before taxes. Barely enough, but stable. Proposed income, $45,000 from the foundation. Less money, but he'd only be working one job instead of two. More time with Maya. Better hours. The ability to sleep like a normal human being. But what happened after the year ended? If he didn't make master, he'd be back to square one. But now, with a year-long gap in his employment history and no guarantee his old jobs would take him back, the spreadsheet couldn't calculate the intangibles. The value of pursuing something he loved. The cost of always wondering what if. The example he'd set for Maya to play it safe, or to take calculated risks when opportunities arose. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya, who was spending the weekend at her mother's place. Dad, did you know that the youngest chess grandmaster ever was 12 years old? His name was Sergey, and he was from Russia. Just learned about it in chess club. Pretty cool, right? Thomas smiled despite his anxiety. Maya had joined the chess club at school 2 months ago, inspired by his Thursday night games with Diana. She was terrible at it, impatient, prone to moving pieces without thinking, easily distracted. But she loved it, loved the idea of it, loved that it was something she and her father shared. He typed back, "That's amazing. How's your game getting? Beat anyone yet?" "Not yet, but I'm getting better. Mr. Harrison says I need to slow down and think more." Sound familiar? Very familiar. Keep practicing, kiddo. I will. Love you, Dad. Love you too. Thomas set down his phone and looked at the contract again. What would he tell Maya if he said no? How would he explain that he'd been offered a chance to pursue something he was genuinely good at, something that made him feel alive, and he'd turned it down because he was afraid? What lesson would that teach her about pursuing her own dreams? He thought about Diana's father's letter, about making time for things that made you happy, not just successful, about the difference between the two. At 9 a.m., he called his ex-wife, Jennifer. "Thomas, is everything okay? Is Maya all right?" "Maya's fine. I need to talk to you about something. Something important." "Okay." Jennifer's tone was wary. They'd maintained a civil relationship post-divorce. but it was always slightly tense, both of them careful not to upset the fragile balance they'd achieved. Thomas explained the situation, the chess games with Diana, the Foundation's offer, the contract, everything. He tried to present it logically, emphasizing the financial stability, the professional opportunity, the fact that this was a legitimate program with oversight and structure. Jennifer was silent for a long time after he finished. "Let me make sure I understand," she finally said. "You want to quit both your jobs to play chess for a year. It's not just playing chess. I know what you're going to say. It's a professional opportunity. It's a calculated risk. It's a chance to develop a valuable skill. And maybe you're right about all of that. But Thomas, you're asking me to trust that this isn't just another one of your impulses." The words stung because they were partially true. In the early years of their marriage, Thomas had jumped between enthusiasms, briefly convinced he'd become a personal trainer, then a real estate investor, then a freelance writer. None of them had panned out. Chess had been different. He'd actually been good at it, had actually made progress, but Jennifer had seen it as another distraction from the practical business of building a stable life. "This is different," Thomas said quietly. "I know I've said that before, but this time I can prove it. I have a contract. I have a coach who's one of the best in the country. I have people willing to invest in me because they see genuine potential. Or they're rich people who can afford to fund your hobby because it amuses them. That's not fair, isn't it?" Jennifer sighed. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I want you to be happy. But I also want Maya to have a father who's present, who's stable, who can be relied on. How does this affect your custody schedule? Your ability to take her on your weekends?" "It improves it," Thomas said, seizing on solid ground. "I'll have better hours, more flexibility. Instead of working 16-hour days and barely seeing her, I'd have actual time, quality time. And Diana, the CEO, I've been playing chess with. She's offered to cover legal fees for renegotiating our custody agreement. Not to change the fundamental arrangement, just to formalize it in a way that accounts for my new situation." "The CEO is paying for your lawyer?" "She's invested in this working out." Another long silence. Thomas could picture Jennifer in her kitchen, probably making breakfast for Maya, weighing his words against years of disappointments and broken promises. "I need to see the contract," she finally said. "I need to talk to these Foundation people, and I want to meet this Diana Mercer. If I'm going to accept that you're not just having some kind of midlife crisis chess fantasy, I need to see that the people behind this are legitimate. That's fair. I can arrange that. And Thomas, if you do this and it doesn't work out, you don't get to use it as an excuse. You don't get to fall apart or make Maya worry about you or put your problems on her shoulders. You take your shot, and if you miss, you land on your feet and move forward." "Agreed?" "Agreed." After he hung up, Thomas felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. He'd cleared one hurdle, but there were so many more ahead. He still had to give notice at his jobs, had to figure out logistics, had to actually prove he was worth the investment. Most of all, he had to figure out if he actually wanted this or if he was just intoxicated by the novelty of being taken seriously by someone like Diana Mercer. He opened his laptop and pulled up a chess website, logged into his dormant account. His old rating was still there, frozen at 2,207. He started a game against the computer set to its highest difficulty level. 10 moves in, he realized he was smiling. His hands moved across the keyboard with confidence, finding moves, calculating variations, seeing patterns. This was what he was good at. This was where his brain worked at full capacity, where everything made sense. Maybe Jennifer was right to be skeptical. Maybe this was a fantasy that would crash and burn. But God, it felt good to be good at something. To have a part of himself that wasn't defined by exhaustion and responsibility and making do with less. He won the computer game in 37 moves. Then he started another one. 3 months later, Thomas sat in the playing hall of the Manhattan Chess Club, surrounded by 200 other competitors, waiting for the third round of the New York Masters tournament to begin. His hands weren't shaking. That surprised him. He'd expected nerves, the kind of paralyzing anxiety that had plagued him in his last tournament 3 years ago. But his hands were steady as he arranged his pieces, checking that his clock was set correctly, his score sheet ready. Maybe it was because he'd spent the last 3 months doing nothing but chess, training with Boston 3 times a week, playing in smaller tournaments to shake off the rust, studying endgames until he could calculate 7-move king and pawn positions in his sleep. His brain felt sharp, honed, ready. Or maybe it was because Diana was somewhere in the audience. She'd driven him here this morning, insisted on staying to watch his games. "I'm invested," she'd said with that small smile that meant she was being more sincere than her tone suggested. "Plus, I want to see how you handle the pressure." His opponent arrived a teenager, maybe 16, with confident eyes and an efficient way of moving his pieces that spoke to hundreds of games played. According to the pairing sheet, the kid was rated 2,289. A tough draw for round 3. They shook hands. The tournament director called for silence. Clock started. Thomas had white. He played his move e4 with the same certainty he'd been cultivating for 3 months. This was his board. These were his pieces. Everything else fell away. After 6 hours and 5 rounds, Thomas stood at 4.5 out of 5, 4 wins and a draw. He was in the lead group, tied with 3 other players for first place going into the final round tomorrow. Boston found him in the analysis room, where Thomas was reviewing his 5th-round game with his opponent, a master-level player he'd managed to hold to a draw in a complex endgame. "Not bad," Boston said, which was high praise coming from him. The 4th-round game was particularly impressive. That knight's sacrifice on move 23, I wouldn't have seen it. Very creative. Thomas grinned, feeling the exhausted satisfaction of a day well played. "I wasn't sure it worked. I calculated it as far as I could, and then just trusted it. Sometimes you have to. Chess isn't just calculation, it's intuition, built on pattern recognition. You're developing that intuition faster than I expected." They went through the day's games together, Boston pointing out moments where Thomas could have played more accurately, positions where he'd missed tactical opportunities. But overall, the assessment was positive. Thomas was performing at the 2,350 level, exactly where Boston had estimated. "Win tomorrow," Boston said, "and you'll gain about 40 rating points. That puts you at 2,247, solidly on track for master by the end of the year." Diana was waiting for him outside the club, leaning against her car, not the corporate sedan with a driver, but a personal car she'd driven herself. She dressed down for the tournament, jeans and a sweater, trying to blend in. She didn't. Diana Mercer didn't blend. "How'd it go?" she asked as Thomas collapsed into the passenger seat. 4.5 out of 5. Leading group? That's good. That's very good. If I win tomorrow, I might gain enough points to break 2,250. Diana started the car, pulling into Manhattan traffic with the aggressive confidence of someone who refused to be intimidated by New York drivers. "Boston told me about the knight's sacrifice. He said it was brilliant." Boston said not bad, which means he was impressed. "I watched part of your 4th-round game," Diana admitted. From the back of the room, "You looked different when you were playing. More present, like that was the most real version of you." Thomas considered this. "Chess is the only place where I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Life is messy and complicated, and full of variables I can't control. But chess? Chess has rules. Every position has a best move, even if I can't always find it. There's something comforting about that. Is that why you were drawn to it? The certainty? Maybe. Or maybe I just like winning." He smiled. "Probably a bit of both." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Over the past 3 months, Something had shifted between them. They weren't friends. Exactly, the power imbalance was still too significant for that. But they developed a rapport, a mutual respect built on their Thursday night games and the strange partnership they'd formed. "Can I ask you something?" Thomas said as they crossed into Queens, heading toward his apartment. "Always. Why did you really do this?" "The whole foundation sponsorship, the coaching, all of it. I get that you enjoy chess and you wanted a challenging opponent. But this goes way beyond that. You've invested time and money and reputation in me. Why?" Diana was quiet for several blocks, navigating traffic while she formulated her answer. "Do you know how many decisions I make in a day?" she finally asked. "Hundreds, maybe thousands if you count the small ones. Most of them are about money, how to allocate resources, which projects to fund, which to cut. I'm good at those decisions. I've made billions by being right more often than wrong. But the decisions I regret aren't the financial ones. They're the human ones. The talented employee I didn't promote because they didn't fit the corporate mold. The innovative project I canceled because it was too risky. All the times I chose the safe, profitable option over the interesting, uncertain one." She paused at a red light, looking at Thomas directly. "You're good at chess. Maybe great. But more than that, you represent something I don't want to lose sight of, the idea that potential matters. That someone working two dead-end jobs to support his kid might have something valuable to offer the world if given the chance. If I can't recognize that, if I can't invest in that, then what's the point of all the money and power I've accumulated?" The light turned green. Diana accelerated, and the moment of vulnerability passed, her corporate mask sliding back into place. "Plus," she added in a lighter tone, "if you make master, the foundation gets excellent press coverage. And I still get to say I helped develop a master-level player. It's good for my reputation in the chess community." Thomas smiled, recognizing the deflection for what it was. "Right. It's all calculated self-interest." "Exactly. I'm a businesswoman. Everything is calculated." They both knew it was a lie, but neither pushed it further. Thomas lost the final round. He played well, everyone agreed on that. His opponent was a 2,450 rated master with decades of experience, and Thomas pushed him to the limit, reaching a complex endgame that could have gone either way. But in the time scramble, with seconds remaining on his clock, Thomas made a small mistake. Not a blunder, just an inaccuracy. It was enough. 3 moves later, he was in a lost position. He resigned on move 62, shook his opponent's hand, and walked out of the playing hall feeling the particular emptiness of a game that almost went your way. Boston was waiting outside. "Tough loss. But you played the position correctly until move 57. It's just that he played it more correctly." "Story of chess," Thomas said, managing a rueful smile. "Someone has to lose. You still gain rating points. Not as many as if you'd won, but your performance in this tournament was rated at 2,370. That's exceptional for your first serious tournament in 3 years." Diana appeared, carrying 2 coffee cups. She handed one to Thomas without comment, just stood beside him while he processed the loss. "I wanted to win," Thomas admitted, "not just for the rating points or the prize money. I wanted to prove I could beat a master." "You will," Boston said with certainty. "Maybe not today, but soon. You're improving faster than any adult player I've coached. Most people plateau around 2,200 and stay there. You're breaking through. Keep working, keep playing, and by year's end, you'll be the one on the other side of these games." After Boston left, Diana and Thomas walked to her car in silence. Thomas felt wrung out, emotionally depleted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "Can I tell you something?" Diana said as they drove. "Watching you play today, even watching you lose, I was proud. Not in a condescending way, but genuinely proud to know you, to be part of your development. You took a risk, You're chasing something difficult. That matters, regardless of outcome. Thomas looked out the window at the city passing by. What if Boston is wrong? What if this is my ceiling, and I never break through to master? Then you'll have spent a year playing chess at a high level, coached by a master, competing in prestigious tournaments. You'll have pursued something you love with complete commitment. How many people can say that about their lives? People with trust funds and no responsibilities. Or people brave enough to take a chance when it's offered. Diana glanced at him. You're being too hard on yourself. One loss doesn't define your potential. I know. Thomas trailed off, not sure how to articulate the feeling. I needed this to work. I needed to prove that walking away from stability wasn't a mistake. To whom? Your ex-wife? Your daughter? Or yourself? The question hit home. Thomas didn't answer. When they reached his apartment, Diana turned off the engine but didn't drive away. They sat in the car, the heater running against the October chill. I lost my first major business negotiation, Diana said suddenly. I was 28, trying to acquire a small tech startup. I was so prepared, so confident. I made a presentation that should have sealed the deal. Instead, the CEO looked at me and said I didn't understand his vision, that I was just another corporate suit who wanted to strip his company for parts. He sold to my competitor for less money rather than work with me. What did you do? I went home and cried for 3 hours. Then I studied what went wrong. I learned that technical competence isn't enough. You have to understand people, their motivations, their fears. That loss taught me more than 10 successes would have. So, trust me when I say, losing today doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're playing at a level where losses are possible, which is exactly where you need to be to improve. Thomas nodded slowly, feeling some of the weight lift. Thank you for the perspective and for everything else. You're welcome. Now go get some sleep. You look terrible. He laughed and climbed out of the car, but Diana called him back. Thomas? Next Thursday. Our regular game. Don't let today shake your confidence. I still expect you to play your best. I will. Good. Because I've been studying your games, and I've found a weakness in your Sicilian defense. I plan to exploit it mercilessly. Thomas grinned, despite his fatigue. Looking forward to it. Maya was staying with him that weekend, a victory in itself, as Jennifer had agreed to let him have more frequent custody time now that his schedule was more predictable. She was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when he walked in, but jumped up the moment she saw him. Dad, how'd you do? 5 out of 6. Drew with a master in round 5, lost to a different master in round 6. That's pretty good though, right? Masters are really strong. It's very good. I gained rating points and played well. Just didn't get the win I wanted in the last round. Maya studied his face with that unnerving perceptiveness 9-year-olds sometimes displayed. You're sad about it. A little. But your chess coach is right. I need to slow down and think more. I made a mistake in the time scramble because I was rushing. Mr. Harrison says mistakes are how we learn. Maya returned to her homework, then added casually, Mom called earlier. She wanted to know how your tournament went. Thomas paused in the act of hanging up his jacket. What did you tell her? That you were still playing. She said to tell you she hopes you did well. Maya looked up. She sounded proud, Dad. Like, actually proud. That meant more than Thomas wanted to admit. Jennifer's skepticism about the foundation sponsorship had slowly transformed into cautious support as she watched him commit to the training, saw him managing his time better, noticed that he seemed happier and more present during his custody time with Maya. That's good. Thomas said, I'm glad. They ordered pizza for dinner and played a few casual games of chess while waiting for delivery. Thomas let Maya beat him, once not obviously, but by playing at her level and missing a few tactics she might find. Her delighted laugh when she checkmated him was worth more than any tournament trophy. After Maya went to bed, Thomas sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, reviewing the day's games. He found the moment in round 6 where he'd gone wrong. The subtle difference between the move he'd played and the move he should have played. The margin between drawing and losing had been microscopic, a single pawn push, delayed by one move. That was chess. That was life. Tiny differences in timing and decision-making that cascaded into vastly different outcomes. His phone buzzed. A text from Diana. "Stop analyzing your loss and get some sleep. Tomorrow we review the games with fresh eyes." He smiled and texted back. "How did you know I was still up?" "Because I know you. Sleep, Thomas. That's an order from your CEO divided by chess patron divided by amateur sports psychologist." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for today. For driving. For watching. For everything. My pleasure. You played well. Now rest." Thomas closed his laptop and looked around his small apartment. Maya's backpack by the door, their pizza plates in the sink, the chess set on the table. This was his life now. Not perfect, not without its anxieties and uncertainties, but fuller than it had been in years. He'd lost today. He'd lose again. But he was playing, competing, pursuing something he loved with the support of people who believed in him. That was worth more than he knew how to measure. 6 months after that first tournament, Thomas sat across from Diana in her office for what should have been their regular Thursday night game. But when he arrived, he found the chess table gone, replaced by Diana's usual desk setup. She was in full CEO mode tailored suit, her hair in its severe professional style, a tablet in front of her displaying what looked like financial reports. "No chess tonight?" Thomas asked, confused. "Not exactly. Sit down, Thomas. We need to talk." The words sent a chill through him. In his experience, "we need to talk" never preceded good news. He sat down in the chair across from her desk, feeling suddenly like an employee being called in for a performance review. Diana studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she slid the tablet across the desk. "These are the Foundation's quarterly reports, your section specifically. Training costs, tournament fees, coaching hours, stipend payments. Total investment in your development over the past 6 months, $47,000. Thomas looked at the numbers, his stomach sinking. "Okay. Your rating has gone from 2,207 to 2,312. That's excellent progress, 105 points in 6 months. You've won 3 tournaments in the under 2400 section. You've drawn against 2 masters and beaten 1. By any objective measure, the investment is paying off." "But," Diana leaned back in her chair, "but the board is questioning whether we should renew your contract for another 6 months. You're progressing toward master level, but not as quickly as they'd hoped. At your current rate of improvement, you'll reach 2,400 inches another year, maybe 18 months. That's longer than the Foundation typically invests in adult players who haven't shown more dramatic results." Thomas felt the floor dropping out from under him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they're giving you an ultimatum. The Spring Masters Championship is in 6 weeks. It's one of the strongest tournaments of the year, with multiple grandmasters attending. If you can achieve a master-level performance, they'll score at least 5 points out of 9 rounds, which would be rated above 2,400. They'll renew your contract. If you don't, your sponsorship ends and you're back on your own." The silence in the office was deafening. Thomas tried to process what he was hearing, but his brain felt like it was moving through fog. 5 out of 9, he repeated. Against grandmasters, and masters, and strong experts. It's the toughest field you'll have faced. But Boston thinks you can do it. So do I. The question is whether you think you can. Thomas stood up, pacing to the window. 6 weeks. 1 tournament. His entire future hanging in the balance. "What if I don't make the score?" he asked, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. "What happens then?" "Then you've had 6 months of intensive training with one of the best coaches in the country. You've improved your rating by 100 points. You've discovered that you can compete at a high level. That's not nothing, Thomas. It's not master level either. No, but it's progress. Diana's voice softened slightly. Look, I pushed for them to extend your contract regardless of results. But the foundation isn't a charity. They have other players they're considering, younger players with more time to develop. The reality is that adult improvement in chess is rare. They need to see that you're exceptional, not just good. Thomas turned to face her. And what do you think? Do you think I'm exceptional? Diana met his eyes steadily. I think you're one of the most determined people I've ever met. I think you've sacrificed and worked harder than most players half your age. And I think that if you go into the Spring Masters believing you can compete with Grandmasters, you'll surprise everyone. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Chess isn't predictable, Thomas. You know that. The best players lose to weaker opponents. Underdogs win tournaments. Ratings are just numbers. Until you sit down at the board and prove what you can do. Thomas slumped back into the chair, his mind racing through calculations. 5 out of 9. That meant he'd have to beat players rated 2,500, 2,600, maybe even 2,700. Players who'd been training their entire lives, who had teams of coaches and databases of preparation. I can't believe I'm going to ask this, he said, but can you and I play a game? Right now? I need to know where I actually stand. Diana raised an eyebrow. You want to play me? I'm rated 2,200. Thomas, you're 100 points higher. It won't tell you anything useful. You beat Boston once this year. Boston is 2,400. That means on your best day, you can play at master level. I need to see if I can beat you decisively, convincingly, the way a master should beat an expert. Please. Diana studied him for a long moment, then stood and walked to a cabinet. She pulled out a portable chess set and clock, carried them back to the desk. All right, one game. Regular time control. But Thomas, you need to understand something. This game doesn't prove anything about what you'll do in 6 weeks. It's just a game. I know. They set up the pieces. Thomas had white. He stared at the board, trying to calm his racing thoughts. This was what he did. This was where he was most himself. He played his opening move, e4. What followed was the most intense game of chess Thomas had played in their 6 months of matches. Diana defended brilliantly, finding resources and positions where Thomas thought he had an advantage. But Thomas pushed harder than he'd ever pushed, calculating deeper, finding tactics he might have missed in a calmer state. On move 34, he founded a rook sacrifice that shattered Diana's kingside, opening up her king to a mating attack. It was beautiful, brutal, decisive. 4 moves later, Diana's king fell. Thomas sat back, his hands shaking from adrenaline. Diana stared at the final position, then looked up at him with something like wonder in her eyes. That was. She trailed off. That was a grandmaster move, Thomas. That sacrifice, I didn't see it coming until it was too late. And even if I had, I'm not sure there was a defense. It was the only move. Everything else lets you consolidate and hold. But you saw it. In a sharp position with time pressure, you found the only winning move. Diana reset the pieces slowly. I can't promise you'll make your score in 6 weeks. But I can tell you this. You just played like someone who belongs in that tournament. Remember that when you're sitting across from grandmasters who are trying to intimidate you. Boston's assessment was more measured. The Spring Masters is going to be brutal. You need 3 wins, 4 draws, and you can only afford 2 losses. That's assuming you're paired against a range of opposition. If you get unlucky and face too many 2,600+ players early, it becomes nearly impossible. They were in Boston's apartment, a book-lined space that smelled of old chess magazines and strong coffee. Thomas had been coming here 3 times a week for 6 months. and it felt more like a sanctuary than his own apartment sometimes. What do I need to work on? Thomas asked. 6 weeks isn't a lot of time, but I'll study whatever you think is most important. Boston pulled out a notebook filled with his cramped handwriting. Your opening preparation is solid. Your middle game tactics are strong. Your endgame technique is probably the best I've coached in years. The problem isn't your chess knowledge, it's your psychology. My psychology? You're a momentum player. When you're winning, you play like a 2,500. When you're under pressure, you drop to 2,200. That inconsistency is what's keeping you from breaking through to master. In a tournament like this, you can't afford the psychological swings. You need to play at your best regardless of how the previous game went. Thomas knew Boston was right. In his recent tournaments, he'd noticed the pattern: a win would fill him with confidence and he'd play brilliantly in the next round. But a loss would shake him, make him second-guess his calculations, cause him to play timidly and conservatively. So, how do I fix that? Thomas asked. Meditation, breathing exercises, mental preparation rituals. All the things that sound like New Age nonsense but actually work. Boston pulled out a book on sports psychology. I want you to read this. Then I want you to develop a pre-game routine. Something you do before every round, win or lose, that gets you into the same mental state. Champions don't let emotions dictate their play. They control their emotional state deliberately. Over the next 6 weeks, Thomas's life became a blur of preparation. He studied Grandmaster games. He worked through tactical puzzles until he could solve them in his sleep. He read the psychology book Boston assigned and developed a routine: 15 minutes of breathing exercises before each round, followed by a review of his opening preparation, then a mental rehearsal of staying calm under pressure. But more than the technical work, he spent time with Maya. If this was going to be his last tournament as a sponsored player, he wanted her to see it, wanted her to understand what he'd been working toward. Can I come watch? Maya asked one Saturday when he was reviewing games at the kitchen table. The tournament? It's 9 rounds over 3 days. That's a lot of chess for a 9-year-old. I don't have to watch all of it. Just one game. I want to see you play for real, not just against me or on the computer. Thomas considered it. Tournament halls could be intimidating, and having Maya there would add another layer of pressure. But she was asking to be part of his world, to understand something important to him. Okay, you can come watch the last round. If I'm still in contention for my score, you'll get to see me play under maximum pressure. Maya grinned. Cool. Should I bring a sign? Like "Go Dad"? Definitely not. Chess tournaments are silent, but you can think it really loudly. The Spring Masters Championship started on a Friday morning. Thomas arrived at the last tournament hall 2 hours early, went through his breathing exercises in the parking lot, reviewed his preparation, and tried to quiet the voice in his head, saying this was impossible. His first-round opponent was rated 2,487, a master, but not an intimidating one. Thomas drew white, played solidly, built a small advantage, and converted it efficiently. 1 win. Round 2 paired him against a 2,654 rated grandmaster. Thomas played black, defended carefully, and managed to hold a draw in a complex endgame. 1.5 points after 2 rounds. Round 3. Another master, rated 2,512. Thomas had black again, chose a solid opening, and ground out a draw. 2 points after 3 rounds. By the end of day 1, Thomas had 2.5 points from 4 games, 2 draws and 2 wins. He was on pace, but barely. He needed 3 more points from 5 games. Diana called that evening as he sat in his hotel room, reviewing the day's games. How are you holding up? Exhausted, mentally fried, but still alive. Boston sent me your games. He says you're playing well, maybe even better than your rating. The draw against Grandmaster Kowalski was particularly impressive. I got lucky. He missed a tactic on move 34 that would have won. Or you defended well enough to give him chances to go wrong. Stop undervaluing your play. Diana paused. Jennifer called me. Thomas sat up straighter. She what? She wanted to know how the tournament was going. I think she's more invested in this than she wants to admit. She asked me to tell you that Maya has been checking the tournament website every few hours to see how you're doing. Thomas felt his throat tighten. I didn't know Maya knew how to do that. Jennifer taught her. Apparently, they've been following your results together since January. Diana's voice softened. You have more support than you realize, Thomas. Now go get some sleep. Day 2 is going to be harder. Day 2 was indeed harder. Thomas lost his first game of the tournament in round 5. A positional squeeze by a 2,589 rated grandmaster that he never quite escaped. Then he won round 6 against a 2,402 expert, playing with the kind of aggressive brilliance that came from knowing he had no margin for error. 3.5 points after 6 rounds. He needed 1.5 from the last 3 games. A win and a draw, or 3 draws. Any combination that got him to 5 points. Round 7 was on Sunday morning. Thomas woke up at 6 a.m., went for a run, did his breathing exercises, and reviewed his preparation. His opponent was rated 2,528, a strong master who played aggressive, tactical chess. The game was a knife fight from move 1. Both players castled on opposite sides and launched pawn storms at each other's kings. The position became so sharp that every move mattered. One mistake meant immediate death. On move 29, Thomas found a piece sacrifice a bishop offer that his opponent had to accept, which led to a forced sequence ending in checkmate 8 moves later. His opponent stared at the board for 3 minutes before resigning. 4.5 points. One more half point, and he'd done it. One draw in the last 2 games. Round 8 paired him against a 2,496 rated master. Thomas had black, played his most solid opening, and offered a draw on move 18 in a completely equal position. His opponent declined and kept playing. They battled for another 40 moves, neither player able to create any advantage. The position simplified to a drawn rook endgame, and finally, on move 58, they agreed to a draw. 5 points. He'd done it. Thomas sat at the board for a long moment after signing the score sheet, letting the reality sink in. He'd achieved a master-level performance. The foundation would have to renew his contract, but there was still one more round. Round 9 started Sunday afternoon. Thomas had clinched his required score, but he was also tied for 3rd place in the tournament. If he won his last game, he'd likely finish in the prize money. More importantly, he'd finish the tournament with a statement win. His opponent was Grandmaster David Chen, rated 2,673. Chen was in his 50s, had been a grandmaster for 30 years, and was known for his uncompromising, aggressive style. Maya was in the audience. Thomas had spotted her sitting with Diana in the back of the playing hall, both of them trying to be inconspicuous. His daughter waved when she saw him looking, then put her finger to her lips, the silent sign they'd practiced. Thomas sat down at the board, arranged his pieces, and waited for the grandmaster to arrive. Chen showed up 2 minutes before the round started, sat down without preamble, and hit the clock. Thomas had black. The game that followed was the best chess Thomas had ever played. Chen came out swinging with an aggressive pawn sacrifice in the opening. Thomas declined it, developed solidly, and slowly built counterplay. By move 20, the position was complex but balanced. Both sides had chances. Then on move 27, Thomas saw it. A knight sacrifice that would destroy Chen's pawn structure and give him a dangerous passed pawn. It was the kind of move that required precise calculation, the kind that could backfire spectacularly if he'd miscalculated. Thomas spent 15 minutes calculating every variation he could find. Then, he took a deep breath and played the sacrifice. Chen's eyes widened. The Grandmaster stared at the position, calculating, searching for the refutation. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Chen's time started to run low. Finally, Chen captured the knight. The sequence Thomas had calculated began to play out on the board. His passed pawn advanced. Chen's pieces couldn't coordinate fast enough to stop it. The position was winning. On move 42, Chen extended his hand in resignation. Thomas shook it, feeling numb with disbelief. He'd just beaten a 2,673 rated Grandmaster. In the last round of the most important tournament of his life, he'd played the game of his life. The tournament hall erupted in applause unusual for chess, but this had been a spectacular game. Thomas saw Maya jumping up and down in the back row, Diana beside her with a smile that looked almost proud. Boston appeared at his side. That night's sacrifice. Thomas, that was a Grandmaster move. Not just the idea, but the execution, the calculation. You played that game at 2,700 strength. I got lucky. He didn't find the best defense. There was no defense. I was following the game on the demo board. You sacrificed the knight because the position was objectively winning after that. You didn't get lucky, you played brilliantly. After the post-game analysis with Chun, who was gracious in defeat, and said he'd underestimated Thomas's tactical vision, Thomas found Maya and Diana waiting outside the playing hall. Maya crashed into him with a hug. "Dad, that was amazing. I didn't understand most of it, but everyone was saying you played like a Grandmaster." Thomas hugged her back, feeling 6 months of tension drain out of him. "Did you follow the game?" Diana explained some of it. She said the move where you gave away your knight was crazy brave. "Crazy is right," Diana added, but she was smiling. "That game is going to be analyzed in chess magazines. You just scored a major upset." "I made my score," Thomas said, the reality still sinking in. 5.5 out of 9. The Foundation has to renew the contract. They will. But more than that, Thomas, you just proved something. Not to the Foundation, or to me, or to anyone else. You proved it to yourself. You belong at this level. You can compete with Grandmasters. The trophy ceremony was brief. Thomas finished in 3rd place overall and won $800 in prize money. More importantly, his performance rating for the tournament was 2,598, nearly 300 points above his official rating, firmly in the Grandmaster performance range. That evening, Diana took Thomas and Maya to dinner at a nice restaurant, not absurdly fancy, but nice enough that Maya felt special. They talked about the tournament, about chess, about everything, except what came next. It wasn't until they were driving back to Thomas's apartment that Diana brought it up. "The Foundation board meets tomorrow. They'll rubber stamp the contract renewal after your performance this weekend. They'd look foolish not to. But I want to talk to you about something else." Thomas glanced at Maya in the back seat, making sure she was occupied with her phone. "Okay, I'm starting a new division of Meridian. We're moving into educational technology, specifically online learning platforms. I need someone to lead the development of our chess education program. Someone who understands both the technical side of chess improvement and the experience of adult learners who don't have traditional advantages." She kept her eyes on the road, but Thomas could hear the significance in her voice. "I'm offering you a position, Director of Chess Education. 65,000 salary to start, full benefits, normal business hours. You'd be developing curriculum, hiring coaches, building the platform. Still chess-related, still using everything you've learned this year, but with more stability than tournament prizes." Thomas's mind reeled. "That's... Diana, I don't have any experience in education or technology. You have 6 months of intensive learning under Boston, one of the best coaches in the country. You have the perspective of someone who came to chess from the outside and worked your way up. And you have something most educational directors don't. You remember what it's like to struggle, to have limited time and resources, to need learning to be efficient because you can't waste a single hour. What about tournaments? My rating? You'd have flexibility. The job is real, but I'm not going to clip your wings right when you're learning to fly. Keep training with Boston, keep playing tournaments. We'll work around your schedule. But you'd have stability, a career, not just a sponsorship that ends in 6 months. Thomas looked out the window, processing. A real job. In chess education, decent money, normal hours. It was everything he'd hoped for when he'd taken the foundation sponsorship, but hadn't dared to expect. Why me? He asked. You could hire someone with experience, credentials, a track record. Because I've watched you teach, Maya. I've seen how you explain positions, break down complex ideas into understandable pieces, and because I trust you, your work ethic, your judgment, your integrity, that's rarer than chess expertise. Thomas thought about Maya in the back seat, about the stability this would give them. Thought about being able to pursue chess without the constant financial anxiety. Thought about building something lasting instead of just chasing ratings. Can I have a few days to think about it? Take a week. But Thomas, whatever you decide, I want you to know you've already won. This tournament, your development, proving everyone wrong who said adult chess improvement was impossible. You've done something remarkable. Don't lose sight of that while you're making decisions about what comes next. That night, after Maya was asleep, Thomas sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, looking at his tournament games. The win against Chin was getting attention. Online chess forums were analyzing the knight sacrifice, praising the calculation, speculating about who this Thomas Reyes was and where he'd come from. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Saw the tournament results. Congratulations. Maya couldn't stop talking about watching you play. She's very proud of you. I am too. Thomas read the message 3 times. Jennifer was proud of him. That meant more than the tournament result, more than the job offer, more than any of it. He texted back, "Thank you. That means a lot. She wants to learn chess properly, wants to be able to play real games like you. I think you should teach her. I'd love that." Good. And Thomas? Whatever you decide about this job Diana offered will make it work. The custody arrangement, everything. You've earned the right to make choices based on what you want, not just what's practical. Thomas set down his phone, feeling something break open in his chest. For 3 years, he'd been running from one obligation to another, making every decision based on necessity rather than desire. He'd taken this chess opportunity because it was offered, not because he believed he deserved it. But somewhere over the past 6 months, that had changed. He'd remembered what it felt like to be good at something, to be recognized for his abilities, to matter in a context beyond his role as father or employee. He pulled up the contract Diana had sent him earlier. Director of Chess Education. It was a real job with a real future, in a field he loved, working with someone who respected him. But there was also the other path: declining the job, focusing entirely on chess, seeing how high he could climb. He'd proven he could compete at master level. Maybe, with another year of training, he could push for grandmaster. It was unlikely, maybe impossible, but then again, 6 months ago beating a 2,673 rated grandmaster had seemed impossible too. Thomas looked at the chess set on his table, at Maya's room where she was sleeping, at the small apartment that had been enough but could be more. He thought about the janitor who'd bumped a chess table 6 months ago, who'd corrected a position without thinking about the consequences. That man would have taken the safe job without hesitation, but Thomas wasn't that man anymore. He'd learned to take calculated risks, to see opportunities where others saw obstacles, to believe in his own potential even when it seemed absurd. He opened his email and started typing. The opening day of Chess Mentor Meridian's new online chess education platform drew 3,000 registered users in the first hour. Thomas watched the numbers climb on the dashboard, feeling a mixture of pride and terror. It's going well, Diana said from her position at the conference room window. They were in Meridian's headquarters, surrounded by the team Thomas had built: coaches, programmers, curriculum developers, all of them working toward the same goal: making quality chess education accessible. It's going well now, Thomas corrected. Wait until people actually use it and find all the bugs we missed. That's what beta testing is for. Stop catastrophizing. Thomas smiled. He'd taken Diana's job offer, but not before negotiating terms that let him continue competing. He'd played in 4 more major tournaments over the past year, each time performing at or above master level. His rating was now 2,387, just 13 points from master, tantalizingly close. But the platform was his real achievement. Along with Boston and a team of expert coaches, Thomas had built a curriculum that started with absolute beginners and went all the way to master-level theory. It wasn't just lessons, it was a complete learning ecosystem, with adaptive training, personalized feedback, and a community of learners supporting each other. "There's someone here to see you," Diana's assistant announced from the doorway. Thomas looked up to find Maya walking in, now 10 years old and carrying her tablet. She'd become a regular visitor to the office, often doing homework in Thomas's office after school while he worked. "Dad, you have to see this." She held up her tablet, showing the Checkmate homepage. "There's a review from someone who says they learned more in 1 week on your platform than they did in 3 years of studying books. They're calling it revolutionary." One review doesn't mean it's not just one. Look, Maya scrolled through a dozen glowing reviews, all posted in the first few hours. People praising the clarity of the lessons, the quality of the instruction, the accessibility of the platform. Diana was smiling. "I told you this would work. You said it might work. There's a difference. I said it would work because I know you. You don't do anything halfway." Diana checked her watch. "Speaking of which, don't you have a tournament game tonight?" Thomas had almost forgotten. It was Thursday. His regular game night with Diana had evolved into a weekly tradition even after he'd taken the job. They still played, still competed, still pushed each other to improve. "I do. You ready to lose? I beat you last week. Statistical anomaly. Won't happen again." They set up the board in Diana's office, the same ritual they'd been performing for over a year. Maya settled into a chair with her homework, occasionally glancing up to watch their game. As Thomas made his opening move, he thought about the janitor who'd bumped that chess table, who'd never imagined this life was possible. A good job, a platform that helped people learn, a daughter who was proud of him, and the game he loved, still challenging him, still pushing him to be better. He hadn't made Grandmaster, might never make Grandmaster, but he'd made something better, a life built around his passion, with people who respected his abilities and supported his growth. Diana played her response move, and the familiar dance began. Outside the window, Manhattan glittered in the evening light. Inside the office, 3 people gathered around a chessboard, connected by a game that had changed everything. Thomas smiled and made his next move, already calculating 7 moves ahead, seeing possibilities branching out like a tree of infinite potential. The game was just beginning,